coming out. Go ahead and curse him. Big damage. Wow, that DPS is actually impressive.
Disturb me! To me, Draven!
What's up, Exiles? So let's go over it. This is going to be a early to a mid-game build guide for a ranger that is interested in using lightning arrow, orb of storms, and of course lightning rod. You can kind of mix up all of them, but specifically you do kind of want to combo your abilities in Path of Exile 2. It does give you a huge benefit. So first off, I want to go ahead and show off some little bit of extra additional gameplay, even though I think the most important part with the build guide is showing you guys all the stats. I do have to show off a little bit more gameplay, even though we had a little bit of an intro clip. So one thing that I actually have on my orb of storms is actually Unleash, but you don't have to have this. What this allows you to do is stack up chargers and expend them all kind of at once, and then that way you are getting double orb of storms versus casting them. So here's how I like to play this build. So what you can do for bosses, I like to throw down the orbs of storm, and then I also just shoot into it, and you're going to see all of these things consistently just go crazy in damage. This is your boss killer. Now, for your non-bosses, you can just shoot lightning arrow. If you feel like the things are dying fast enough, you can just kill them with a lightning arrow. Now, if you want to, you can throw a lightning rod first. It won't work because there's no enemies here, but then shooting at your lightning arrow for just basically some trash mobs and elites. But the thing that's going to make you go crazy for DPS on bossing is Orb of Storms. But you can match any sort of a variety of them to your liking, to your playstyle. And then I use Escape Shot if I get kind of like in this area where, like, let's say there's too many monsters I can't move, I can kind of jump back. So that's basically all the skills that you realistically need. But if you want to also add conductivity or sniper's mark, you could add that. Now, conductivity will require a hefty amount of intelligence. So if your build has it, it's just objectively going to give you more numbers than pretty much sniper's mark. But this thing is excellent as well. But this one is technically kind of optional. Another thing is that the curses don't work the same as PoE 1. So in PoE 2, when you use a curse, you throw it on the floor. It takes like a second, and then it applies the curse. In PoE 1, it would just basically automatically curse himself. Just giving you guys some info. So if it's like a highly mobile boss, you may want to kind of aim ahead of it. But yeah, so now that we kind of understand how to use the skills, let's go over all of the gear and all of the gems, all of that stuff. So I think the gems is the thing that I want to hop in first, and then we'll go over gear, and I'll mention some other really great things that you can utilize for leveling. So for starters, as far as the gems go, this is what I'm currently running. So Lightning Arrow, Martial Tempo, Lightning Infusion, and Primal Armament. So this is almost like elemental damage with attacks if you played PoE 1. So that is the setup. I added this one later. I think you need like a gem skill 2 to get that one. Now, the other skills over here, we have conductivity, we have persistence, and heightened curse, so we get more effectiveness on it. So this is what these things do. If you're wondering if certain things work, you can always remove them and add them here. It kind of helps out. Then with Orb of Storms, now I also want to mention Orb of Storm does not deal any damage, okay? This is based off of spells. So what it's really used for is for things to chain off of it. And then there's Overabundance, which allows us to have an extra limit. Now this one, while you're leveling, you're probably not going to get this one earlier on, like in terms of a 3. The most important thing is really just chain. These other two ones, this will let you have 2 of them, and then this one will essentially let you just place it 2 of them instantly. If you want to add another one, there is one where it automatically will be placed. Now, I also want to mention with Orb of Storms, it does not get placed wherever your cursor is. It kind of gives you a little bit ahead of your character. So it is almost melee range, just to keep expectations realistic with this, unless you get like crazy size. And then we're using Herald of Thunder, Vitality, and Innervate. So this one doesn't really matter too much. I mean, it's just extra damage, but I really liked this for leveling. It was a really great thing, but earlier on you may not have the Spirit to have it. If you don't, it's fine. It's like the only one that gives you any like value here. And then Lightning Rod. So Lightning Rod is another source of our damage. We're running more area of effect. We are also running less damage here with Scatter Shot, but it gives us more projectiles, which gives us essentially some extra damage. And then we have Lightning Penetration, so it's just extra damage over here. And then the Escape Shot, we run Frost Nexus, which applies a debuff on the enemies. However, you don't really need this thing. This is optional. But having Escape Shot is something that I would recommend you to use. But again, the extra support gem, don't feel like you need to get it ASAP. So now that we went over that, I want to go over the gear and mention some of the things that you can run. So I actually leveled all the way to the Cruel difficulty with this. This is, again, mainly oriented around like a early to a mid slash maybe earlier end game sort of a build, but pretty much most of the stuff will just be some like sort of like numerical stat number increases. So I'm going to show you guys some of the stuff that I was using while I was like leveling, and then stuff that we'll actually use later. So in the very beginning, just look for any bow that's going to give you physical damage. Now, the reason why I'm saying physical damage is that increased like percent physical damage is actually usually a lot better. I'm going to actually move my face out of the way. A lot of times that's going to be actually better than like the added lightning damage. In PoE 2, they kind of scuffed up all the added elementals in terms of damage. It used to be kind of like the best, but now like getting flat fizz and then getting increased fizz is better, and then you just would convert it to your element. This applies to pretty much everything as far as it goes in a lot of different builds, not just like lightning arrow. But there's not really anything super like good with this bow. It's just something that I just threw in here. Now this is something that I'll eventually use. It's just listed here just so I can maybe make a profit in terms of like trying to get additional currency. But this is what we'll use at level 55. But we're looking for, again, mainly stuff that gives us extra physical damage. Even though we are lightning based, you normally would think, oh, why wouldn't you want lightning damage? The amount of lightning damage you get is incredibly low. But if you can get plus level of projectiles, physical damage, if you get lightning damage, sure, it's not bad. But like, it's just, the numbers are simply just too low. But what you want to look for is called a dual string bow. So it starts off on regular, and then you can get advanced, and you can get like another one. But they will have level requirements as you go up. So you can go to the Path of Exile trade website. Let me go actually pull this up too. If you go to the Path of Exile trade website, you could just search for whatever like bow that you want. So if you go to item category, that you would say like, let's say bow, and then you could just look up dual string bow, advanced, expert, and then it kind of goes from there. So that's like the base of the item that you want. The reason why you want this is because it will specifically give you an additional arrow. Another thing I wanted to mention is, as far as it goes with like skills that shoot up in the air for the Ascendancy, because it's technically a ranger and it's a Deadeye. This was posted a long time ago. This is technically for Path of Exile 1, but this is like the only official thing that I can like find with how the interaction works between projectiles. So and how it works with like rain of arrows and like far shot, because on our Ascendancy we actually take a node that's supposed to give us more damage based on like being further away. So we use lightning arrow to pretty much clean up the trash mobs, but on the Ascendancy over here, there's two things that you can take. You can either get far shot or one that does more damage based on you being closer. So this one's, you get more damage the further that you are away from the target, which is great for lightning arrow because we're kind of sitting back shooting. And then there's one that gives you more damage if you are closer. It's kind of like up to you. Whatever you want to take, just take it. I wouldn't really worry about it. The reason why I'm taking this one is if there is some way that they add for projectiles to return to you after, then far shot is pretty much just going to be the one that everyone's going to want because it's effective at basically all times, because even if they're like point blank from you, you hit them and then the arrows then return, it will calculate that distance. But with things that come up in the air and then come down, kind of like how lightning rod works, I'm pretty sure that it only works from you being close, assuming that it works the same as rain of arrows. Again, it's a new scale, PoE 1 and 2. Sometimes there's overlap, sometimes there's not, so take that with a grain of salt. You can take whatever Ascendancy you want here, and then we just get endless munitions, because again, this is kind of like early to mid. But anyways, we got to go back to the item because that kind of tied in, because the reason why we want to dual dual string bow is because we want those additional arrows, and additional arrows means, well, essentially more damage. Certain skills in PoE can shotgun, like in PoE 1 at least tornado shot could, but then like there are other skills where you can't hit the same target with like getting point blank and just hitting them all with like, let's say 3 or 5 whatever arrows. So that's something to mention. But yeah, just get a dual string bow. That's the main thing that you want with those stats. And then pretty much across the board, all you're really looking for is life, resistances. Get as much as you can. If you need attributes, your amulet is a great source of getting specifically those, because remember, we're going to need a little bit of intelligence in order to run conductivity. Again, you can skip out on conductivity, it's not required, but it will significantly help out your like burst DPS. A lot of the bosses in PoE, I'm sure you guys notice, when you go up to them, they kind of have like they gotta say they're like cool one-liner thing, and then they fight you. But during that time, you can basically set up your Orb of Storms, you can set up your conductivity. There's like a kind of like a 1 second delay before it actually activates, so yeah, that's great. Again, lightning damage where you can. If you get flat physical, that's totally fine too. I'm just like mousing over my gear, but the most important thing is pretty much just getting HP and resistances in any area you can. If you have extra spirit, cool. Doesn't really matter though. I just like to have vitality. Now for the boots, ideally you'd get resistances, movement speed, as well as life. That's kind of like your go-to. This belt is pretty bad. And then these gloves are absolutely terrible, but they have one stat that is important for the build, and that is any amount of cold damage. It doesn't matter if it's 1 cold damage. Just somewhere on your build, you want 1 cold damage. And the reason why you want that cold damage is it'll apply chill. Even if it's a 0.001% like chill slow on the enemy, it is important for our passives. For the flask, nothing important here. For the charm, I just threw in this to be unaffected by slows. But for the most part, there isn't really anything that's like super godly on my character build, because I was streaming and a lot of people were like, dude, can you drop a build guide? Usually I try to make a build guide towards the end, but I get it. Path of Exile 2 is going to be a lot longer before you get to the end game, so I think for a lot of my like build guides going forward with PoE 2, I'm going to make an early to mid and then like a late game one, because the amount of time that is required, especially from a newer player coming from, let's say, Diablo, as most of my followers are, I would say, probably from Diablo, I think that it does make sense to kind of have a progression one. And if you're looking to put in other runes, you can use storm runes, or you can increase, if you have a good physical roll, you can also throw those in. I just happened to pick this item up, and there are a couple items that we purchased for like a Regal or an Exile that we have equipped over here. So keep in mind, trade is big in Path of Exile, unlike in Diablo. Early on, you definitely want to actually trade. There was a item that I was actually using while leveling, and I could highly recommend it. I bought this for 1 Regal. It was, no, not Ice Tomb, it was this. So I bought this for 1 Regal. It's a really nice item to actually have. It's called Dust Blue. So what it does is it gives you life regen per second per fragile growth, you get increased mana regen per fragile growth, and you lose all fragile regrowth in 1 hit, and you gain 1 every second. It's actually faster than that, but it's a really great item. It's got high evasion. It does require you to be level 26, but it basically carried me through the game. It required me to have no mana interaction, which was great, because you get 100% of your mana regen, as long as you don't take any damage. And if you're evasion-based builds, you will have the ability to just not take damage for a while. Eventually, you may get hit, but for the most part, it regens pretty fast. You also get basically 5%. Remember, that will stack up 10 times. So basically, you get 5% life regen, and that makes this super beginner-friendly. So in the very beginning, again, if you don't happen to have like something that has like life, well, this one's a little bit better because it has resistances. But in the earlier stages, I really like this. This just happens to have way more evasion rating. But this over here basically carried me through the game when I was doing the campaign. And by the way, the intro clips were all on cruel difficulty. And obviously on the easier difficulties, you can kind of melt the bosses fast. Now, just as a heads up, I want to keep expectations realistic. When you are fighting these bosses and you are standing still like point blank, sometimes on evasion based builds, if you get hit by the boss and it is a physical based damage and it is a crit, you will die. It's just how evasion builds work in Path of Exile. Essentially, you just take 0 damage for a long time, but when you take damage, it hits really hard. And the bosses can crit in PoE. It was in an interview, and maybe it'll be changed later, but bosses critting, especially against evasion-based builds, is pretty bad. So we're going to get way more defenses later in the game. I'd say, like, you really don't need that much defenses while you're doing your first run-through or your second run-through. It's going to be in maps where you need those defenses. But speaking of that, let's get into the tree now that we went over the itemization and we went over the skills. So as far as it goes, this is my skill tree. I was kind of testing out a lot of stuff. In the very beginning, some of the bosses, it'll take time to actually kill if you don't use the orbs or storm strategy. And remember, when you use your like gems over here, you need to select the other tab, because some people are like, how did you get that sorceress skill, which is essentially essentially is the Orb of Storms. So when you use your uncut gems, you can get things from other areas. You just need to make sure that you select it, and then you'll be able to get whatever that you want. Some of them will have a lot like strength requirements or something. The one that's going to have a huge requirement is going to be your Orb of Storms. And you'll see I do not happen to have a high level Orb of Storms. It could be level 1. The only thing that's really important with this is that it creates the orb, which is going to be allowing us to just keep on chaining those little like things to kind of activate. So our Orb of Storm basically facilitates the damage that we actually get with specifically Lightning Rod. We can actually level this one up. Cool. So make sure you keep Lightning Rod and the Lightning Arrow leveled up. So again, you throw down one lightning rod and then you shoot the lightning arrow and it basically cleans up all the trash mobs. So this is like our trash killer and this is our boss killer. It's really cool that we can basically kind of like have like two really good things. So we have good clear speed and then we also get good bossing because lightning arrow is really great for just kind of killing most of the stuff. Don't feel like you have to spam just only lightning arrow. If you want to play like that way, hey, go for it. But the Lightning Rod and Lightning Arrow combo, and Path of Exile 2 definitely wants you to combo, is going to be much, much smoother. All right, going over to the passives. So for Ascendancy, I took the Far Shot for the first one. If you want the one that lets you do damage to close, that's fine. Up to you, whatever. It doesn't really matter too much. Again, like I said before, Far Shot will be like objectively better later once we get projectiles to return, which I don't even know how we're going to get into PoE 2. There's a cool ring called Nimbus, and there used to be this like thing that you can anoint, but anyways, endless munitions just for that additional projectile. I wanted this. This is the main thing. More projectiles equals more speed, and then later we will get Tailwind. Then the fourth one for Ascendancy, it genuinely doesn't matter. Usually I'd have like some sort of like build guide for you guys, but this is kind of earlier on as I was streaming. I was getting asked, hey, do you have a build guide for this? Your build does a lot more DPS. It comes down really not to necessarily just copying the build correctly, but mainly you just need to get a bow that's a dual shrink bow. It has an additional arrow. You can get it like relatively earlier on, but in the very like, you know, if you're like level 5, don't expect to just get a dual string bow instantly. You can purchase these off of the vendor and then craft them yourself, but I'd highly recommend just get one Regal or get one Exalt. You'll get one by the time you finish the very first like Act 1. Like once we finish Act 1, kind of expect to see a dual string bow in your inventory when you maybe either refresh some of the vendors or you can just like trade. It's not difficult to get, but remember it does have that level requirement for any of the pieces of gear. Don't think that, oh, he runs a Viper cap, I need a Viper cap. Again, HP and resistances every single area. One item that you need in your inventory has to have cold damage. Okay, that is important. The reason why is it applies what's called a elemental ailment that is not shock. Shock has a chance to apply, but the cold will always just apply the chill, even if it's at, again, a 0.1%. It's still worth it. Anyways, so this is the tree. While I was leveling, if you guys do want the full like leveling, it was a complete blind walkthrough. I was kind of trying out other things to see what was working. So this is kind of what I end up on, and I'm going to be getting a lot more defenses literally in my next level, but I wanted to give you guys this video fast. So anyways, we're just getting basically more damage, more attack speed. There's one that some content creators were talking about over here. I hated this though. It's called Heavy Ammunition. You have reduced attack speed. Yeah, you get more damage, and you can apply a higher shock value, and then you can get even more damage, but I really, really dislike any sort of variance of losing out on attack speed, because it makes the game feel worse. So we get all of this attack speed earlier on, and then we get this increased damage for each type of ailment, so that's going to be shock, and if you do tactically hit them with like a ignite, that can actually be another 15%, basically it's like 30% damage node over here. We just get this extra chance to shock over here, and if you want to check any of your stats over here, you can always click on the little arrow, and it'll tell you pretty much most of the stuff. Unfortunately, it tells you like your main hand critical hit, chance, but it doesn't really go over everything like you would see in PoE 1. I feel like there was more details, but like it kind of helps out if you're wondering how you can calculate your like shock and stuff like that. You would just have to use like some other builder website. Anyways, so for starters, we go over here, we grab this. The thing that you actually really want to actually prioritize, you can see we're just going over here. As far as jewels go, I actually only have 2 jewels in right now, but attack speed, the shock duration, evasion, increased attack speed with bows, any variant of those is totally fine. But we're just going over here, and we're getting one of the most important nodes in the game. This is the most important thing. Lightning Rod. Your lightning damage with non-critical hits is lucky. In the very beginning, on base, well, it depends on your base of the weapon, but this one happens to be 5%. A lot of things are going to be 5% base chance crit. If I get 100% crit chance, like on an item, let's say it rolls 100% crit, that does not actually mean we have 100% crit. What that means is it will multiply our base crit, which is 5, and then we get 100% of that, which is another 5. So that gives us basically 10 total crit. So I know a lot of people come from Diablo, and that's why I'm mentioning these things, but we don't really care. If we crit, that's cool. We, obviously get all the crit multipliers that we have by default in the game. I believe isn't it like 50? I think it's 50%. You can always again go over here, then open up this thing, and then you can see, does it actually okay, so our crit bonus is double. So we basically get double damage if we crit. Now, I don't really care if we crit or not because we have Lightning Rod. Lightning Rod makes it so our lightning damage with non-critical hits is lucky. What is lucky? Well, it doesn't even tell us in the game. I'll tell you what it does. It rolls the lightning damage twice. So one thing that is important to mention is lightning damage, just like in Diablo, is very varied in terms of like the min and the max number. So what that means is our average damage per use is this number, but you can see that the damage is 241 to 1356. That is a big range, right? Now, what Lucky does is it hits the enemy essentially twice, and it takes the bigger number on a non-crit. So this is actually a huge DPS increase. So I think rushing this is definitely key. So for starters, copy this over here. So get this, go over here, grab this. You can get this extra evasion rating, and especially since if you roll, you get the extra like bonus here. So you get this extra evasion, you get this extra evasion movement speed here if you want to. Earlier on, go down here and then grab this. This is the most important thing. You grab this too because it's kind of cool. And then later, after you do that, you can then get this over here for survivability. So you get some extra dex here. You have 100% increased evasion rating for when you equip body armor, so basically double, so 600 additional evasion rating, great. And then I just got a little bit more evasion rating over here. And the next skill point that we're going to get is going to be massive. This is called Iron Reflexes. So we delete all of our evasion rating. Currently right here you can see my chance to just not take damage is 75%, which is great. That's awesome, right? Why would I want to get rid of that? Well, how it works in PoE 2 is that if you rip on the map, then essentially you lose out on it. So with evasion-based builds, especially when you take high physical damage, you are taking big chunks of damage. Now, there are other ways to kind of mitigate it, but the easier way to do this is just to get Iron Reflex, because you're already going to be down here. There's additional attack speed nodes over here. Actually, some other good like damage nodes here. So it's like a great like way to go. Whereas over here, as far as it goes on the bows, you have attack speed with bows, which is not bad. But then a lot of the stuff over here isn't really that lucrative. There's no additional arrow that you can get like in PoE 1. Yeah, you can get like 2 different like additional arrows, which are like much easier to obtain. But this over here is going to be fantastic. And that way we have a lot more survivability. This is going to be great. It's more consistent survivability is what I probably should say, because evasion, while it is great, you don't have any damage reduction, which is going to make it so if a boss does hit you and it is going to be a crit, well, you're just out of luck, which kind of sucks. You can, in Path of Exile, get crit avoidance, but especially earlier on, it is not really worth it to get crit avoidance. It is not worth it to get crit in a lot of different builds because you simply don't have the crit damage or the critical strike chances to really add up. But that's what we've got for the plans, and hopefully this video guide was fast enough and it helped you guys out. And if there's any other questions, let me know as far as it goes. That's what I've been playing, and I would say it does facilitate a very cool playstyle, good against bosses, good against trash, but don't expect it to be like super OP level 1. Okay, I copied all his skills. It's going to require you to get like certain pieces of gear just to keep expectations realistic. Path of Exile is a game where it's heavily based on gear versus like Diablo. You just get this one aspect and it gives you a 300% damage multiplier. In the earlier stages, you will have to dodge, you will have to roll, but once you get Orb of Storms, you can go up to the bosses. Orb of Storms plus Lightning Rod, you can get these and go up to the bosses even earlier on and try to roll out of the slam attacks. Those are the big red ones. If you roll out of those ones, you can kind of face tank stuff, but I've realized that it's much faster on some bosses just to go in, try and see if you can out DPS their DPS, and if you can't, then you can fight it properly. So again, just keep expectations realistic. Anyways, that's gonna wrap it up. I'll be making more PoE guides in the future, and I'll usually have like a link to these, but like a lot of the builder websites are kind of still like kind of scrambling to get some of the stuff together because a lot of like roles that just there's a lot of differences between PoE 1 and 2, so some websites were copying it, and well, the numbers are way off, especially if you look at the elemental damage. But again, physical and lightning is what you want to go for in terms of damage over here. But that's gonna wrap up the video. If you guys enjoyed it, drop a like on it. If you're new here, subscribe to the bell if you want to see an update to this build. We'll do like an endgame guide for this, as well as the sorceress very soon. But anyways, take care, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. If you have suggestions to make it better, though, definitely let me know, and I'll improve it on our next guide.